Hello real estate investors. Hey, today I'm doing a job where I am going to fill nail holes, caulk trim, and paint all the trim and doors. Now typically you would paint your trim before you put it in, and then all you have to do is caulk, patch the nail holes, and go back and paint it, touch up the paint. But this was put in, unfortunately I put this in about 6 years ago and never did finish the job. So today I'm back here to finish it up finally. And I'm going to have to repaint it all just because I won't be able to touch it up, it won't match. So before we go in and get started on work, I want to show you the materials and the tools that I will be using. First, for caulking, you need to use a latex caulk. This is the brand I happen to have now just because it's White Lightning, just because the rep at Lowe's gave me a case of it. But typically I use DAP, but this is fine product. The key is it needs to be paintable. It needs to say paintable and water cleanup on it. If it's not, it'll be a mess. If you're using a silicone, it'll be an absolute mess. So just make sure it has latex caulk in the name and it's water cleanup and paintable, and you'll be fine. For your caulk gun, so I've got a couple guns here just to kind of demo what you'll want. You'll want to get one of the nicer kind. Now you can see this one's well used. But the key is when you push it out, it doesn't have any pressure left on it. Because if you use this type, these real cheap ones, this looks like it's a Walmart brand. When you move it out, you can't push it back. So what happens if you forget to release this and take the pressure off, you'll set your caulk gun down and it'll just keep oozing out. So spend a few bucks more, get this type that will automatically release when you take your pressure off the handle. Now for filling the nail holes, you can use several different products. You can use caulk. I don't really like to do that because you're putting white caulk on white trim, and a lot of times you'll miss cleaning it up, and then when you paint it, it'll show through. Wood filler is a really good product. It's probably the best product, but I choose just to use a spackle. Now you can get different kinds of spackle. This one's pretty heavy. This kind of goes on pink. It's DAP Dry Dex. Goes on pink and dries white. They have other products. I think it's called One and Done. It's the cans, you pick it up and it feels like it's lighter than air. That stuff seems to shrink too much, so I tend to go with this a little bit heavier. It doesn't shrink as bad and seems to work pretty good. But you know, you could use, like I said, caulk, wood filler, or any spackle will work. And then for paint, I am going to use a semi-gloss interior. It's perfect white. This is pre-mixed at Lowe's, so you don't have to get anything mixed. I just think it's important on baseboards and doors. They take a beating, so you at least want a satin or semi-gloss. I choose to use semi-gloss because it's a little bit tougher. And then tape, if you're going to be, I don't use tape when I'm doing baseboard or doors, but if I'm doing, except when I'm on carpet, if I'm doing baseboard on carpet, I will use tape, and I'll show you how to apply that. And then I get these little whiz rollers. These are great for doors because it's got the nap on the end so you can get into the crevices. And then I use this Worcester Pelican, which is what's great about this. You put your paint in the bottom, and then it's got a magnet to hold your brush and also a spot to hold your roller, so it makes it real convenient to go around, and you can carry both of these with you easily with this type of pan. Now, as far as brush, I have two brushes. This is a cheap one from Harbor Freight. I think it's a $4 or $5 brush. I carry this around just to clean off the baseboards, to get all the dust off. But then you want to have a really good quality brush to do your finish coat with. Purdy Clear Cut is my favorite brush of all the ones I've tried. This one happens to be brand new, but these brushes will last you for many years, so spend the money, get you a good quality brush. I got a couple of sanding sponges, always good to have a painter's tool on hand. And then finally, either a screwdriver or a drill gun, and that's to take the doorknobs off. I tend to remove those before I paint. So with that, that's all the tools and materials. Of course, drop cloth, if I didn't mention that, and you'll want a wet rag to carry around with you all the time. So with that, let's go in and get to finishing. All right, to get started with the caulking, and patching the nail holes. So I have my caulk gun, my caulk, junk brush, wet rag, and my spackle. So when preparing your caulk gun, you'll need to cut off the tip, obviously, And you can see here, I prefer the angle cut tip. Doesn't matter if you do angle or you do the blunt cut, really doesn't matter. You know, you just cut off straight. The key is to get as small as hole as possible, because these are very small cracks. And if you've got a real big tip on here, real big hole cut in the tip of your caulking, then you're going to have a mess on your hands and have caulking everywhere. So, like I said, I prefer the angle. Do what you want, just make it small. And then we'll just start in here in this corner. Oh, before I start, I'm going to take my brush, brush everything off. And I also hit the floor too, in case there's dog hair or whatever down here. Because when I come back painting, I don't want to pick that stuff up and get in my paint and brush. So now we'll start with the caulk. And you can, obviously you got your tip cut small, so it's not putting out a lot of caulk. But you also can control how much caulk you're putting by the speed you're going and the pressure you're applying to the handle. Now if it's a bigger gap, I'll put more pressure and go a little bit slower. Real small, tiny gap like here, I won't have much pressure and I'll be going faster. It's just one of those things you have to practice to get used to it. So now I'm going to speed up here. Crack's getting a little bigger, I'll slow down. And now you just take your finger, and I hold pressure when I'm doing my finger. I hold pressure against the wall because I don't want the caulk riding up the wall. So you just wipe it down. Now, I don't know if you see right here, I made a little bit of a mess and I have it too much, and that's where your rag comes in. You can just take that and wipe that right off the wall if you put too much caulking in there. All right. So the next step is we will fill our nail holes. Let me set up the camera to get you a better angle on that, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so here's the area where we caulked. It looks pretty good along the wall. Once we get to the corner, we'll have to caulk that seam too. Same thing over here where this butts up. We'll have to caulk that area as well. Now let me show you the nail holes. So I'm going to try to do this holding the camera. So I just take the dry deck spackle, put a little dab on your finger. You don't need much, just a little bit. Cover up the hole. Get as much of it off as you can. With your finger. Now take your rag. Now you could let this dry and come back and sand it, but I find it easier just before it dries. Just take your rag, and you don't want to put any pressure. Just rub your rag over the wall. And you can see it leaves the hole filled. And now I don't have to come back and sand it. Now it will be perfect? No, but it's good enough for what I'm doing. All right, so we got all the nail holes filled, wiped off, got everything caulked, and now we're getting ready to paint. So there's a couple ways when you're painting. You can tape the area off if you like, which isn't that hard. You can get it under the baseboard, that's great, or just get it right up to it. Tape it. Not that difficult, but I just don't do this. I think it's a waste of time, waste of money to buy the tape to do this on a hard surface. So I don't use that. Another thing you can do is use a tool like this. You put it on here, and then you can paint right to it, and then move it on down. The problem I have with these, I've just found that as I get paint builds up on them, when I move them, I end up getting more paint on the floor than I would if I was just doing it by hand. So I just cut it in by hand, keep a rag handy, get a little paint, you can just wipe it off real easy, not a big deal. Now the one exception where I do use tape is on carpet, and there's a little bit of a trick to putting this on tape on carpet. So let's go up to a carpet area and I'll show you how to do that. All right, to tape up your baseboard on carpet, we'll just do a little demo area here. So I'll tear a small piece of tape. First, I like to try to get the pile going away from the baseboard as much as possible. And then when you put your tape on, you just put it on real loose, and you want it a half to a quarter inch up the baseboard. Now as I start to set the tape, I'm going to pull the pile this way and then shove the tape underneath. So pull it, I'm going to shove it underneath, pull it, shove it underneath. Now we can push it underneath. Now we got the tape all the way underneath the baseboard. You still need to be really careful when you're painting this and not go into this area with a fully loaded brush. As always, when you're painting trim, you unload, once you have your brush loaded, you unload it in the center and then come down here and hit it with a dry brush, just a real light touch with a dry brush so the paint doesn't drip down behind here and get on your carpet. I've already, the caulk's dried, nail holes are dried, and I've already started painting down on this end of the baseboard. So to get started, just take your brush, dip it in about 1 inch, and you want to knock the paints just off the side. Now come in here, and you don't ever want to start with a loaded brush at the very top or very bottom. You want to unload the paint that's in your brush in the middle here. And then once you have some of the paint out of the brush, then you can come along this top edge. You just catch the edge. Just down here. Just take your time, no rush. You just catch that edge. Now on the bottom, when you're ready to paint that, I come in here and pick up some more paint, and then I put my paintbrush about 1 inch away from the bottom edge and flex it down. Now I can run along the bottom edge, and if you leave a 1/16 at the bottom, no one's ever going to notice it, but you don't paint. Alright, and now the last thing, I want to feather in my paint, and you always feather into where you painted previously, and then you can just lift it off. If I would start right here and jab in and try to feather this way, you'll see that mark when the sun hits the baseboard where I jabbed the paintbrush in. So always feather into where you painted already, and then you can lift off. And that's really it. It's that simple to paint your baseboard without using tape. Alright, so quickly I'll show you how to paint the doors. Typically I pull the handles off. It's just easier. I could cut around them really easy with a brush, but then right where you look, it leaves the swirl marks around the doorknob. I know you've probably all seen that. So I take it off, especially in this case, I'm going to replace the hardware. So I went ahead and took it off. So the way I like to start, I use this Whizzy roller, and I like to hit all the panels first. Now you could just roll this entire thing out and call it a day, but I don't think the finish looks as good, and you get the little stippling in the paint left by the roller. I just don't think it looks as nice as a brush door. So I just use the roller to get the paint, move the bulk of the paint in here, and then what I do is come in with my brush and I try to brush it with the grain. And now this is fake grain in this door, but the wood grain in this panel is going this way. So I just try to brush this with the grain, try to get the excess paint out, and then come back and brush this with the grain. Do the same thing, get in these little edges, brush it with the grain. And that's good. You want to always keep looking, like here's a spot where you'll get runs on both sides, so always come back and look to see if you have any runs forming after you've done this. So I'm just going to go really quick to paint this door, show you how fast you can really go when you're done these. Now I do like to spray doors if I have a large area set up, but spraying, while it sounds cool, it looks cool when you watch someone doing it, it is a hassle. It's a lot of setup, it takes a lot of area to do it, and a lot of paint too. You get through a ton of paint when you're spraying. So jobs like this, it's just easier just to do it by hand. So get it in all the little areas here. Now we'll just come back and feather it with the faux grain. Look for runs, that looks good. Now with this technique, come back and brushing it, you can almost get as good a finish as you can spraying. It's not as good, but it's almost as good, and without all the hassles that come with spraying. Now I'm not trying to get perfect coverage, I'm just trying to load paint in here so I can come back with the roll or the brush fill in what I missed. I'll fill it with the grain. Check for any runs. That looks good. Now once I've done all the panels, then you can choose to do whichever you want, the horizontal or the vertical, the styles of the rails, maybe you go by that name, but it doesn't really matter. So in this case, I'm going to do the horizontals first. And now the grain is going this way, so I will feather this way. Now we'll do this little section here in the middle. Now the grain on that's going up and down, so we're going to start here, feather up. And clean up around these edges. Go down to this horizontal section. Feather it in. We'll do this vertical. And this bottom one, you have to be really careful or you'll get paint on the floor. I'll go slow here. Get the final little bit with the brush, it'll be easier. There's a run there. Alright, here's a run here. You gotta always go back when you're doing these doors and keep checking for runs, because they will appear after you've painted it. Now I got a little paint on this gold hardware here, but that's coming off anyhow. Cutting around the bottom, feather this out. And on this, you have the hinges. Once again, they've been replaced, but I'll cut in like they've not been replaced. I'll go along these, cut in. Now I can use my roller. Now I don't have to be careful around this door frame because I'm going to paint it as well. Just feathering out, hitting any spots that didn't get coated. And that's about it. That's how quick you can paint a door. Last step I always do is go around, check all these areas where runs are common. Around the bottom edge, top edges here. Here's one, there's a little one. Check all those, and then here's another place that runs are pretty common. But that's it. That's how quickly you can paint a door by hand, and you get a pretty good finish, almost as good as spraying it. Not quite as good, but almost as good with a lot less hassle. So now I will paint the door frame. All right, it's been a long day. My knees are killing me, but I'm finally done. I've pretty much done the whole lower level today. For this house, you can see all the hardware I've changed out. Here's our baseboards. You can see the finish on it. Not perfect, but a lot better than it was. Overall, pretty good. And here's the door we were painting. You can see we put new handles on and new hinges, and there's the finish. Once again, not 100% perfect, but a hell of a lot better than it was. So hopefully you enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you like this kind of content, please be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.